The timer began ticking, and with every second that passed, the air grew heavier. At just 10% power, the bomb we were about to test already pulsed with a menacing glow, and the ground beneath our feet felt as if it could give way at any moment. Everyone in the control room leaned forward, hearts pounding, eyes glued to the live feed. This wasn't just another experiment. This was the beginning of a scale no one had dared to push before. The question was simple. How devastating could one blast become when we turned the dial from 10% all the way up to its maximum, a terrifying 100%. And the truth is, by the time we reached the final stage, survival was no longer an option. At 10%, the countdown hit 0, and the device unleashed a deafening roar that echoed across the barren test field. Dust and debris shot upward in a swirling vortex, blinding the cameras for a moment. The sound was violent, yet somehow incomplete, like the growl of a beast that hadn't yet shown its true form. The shockwave rattled the armored glass in the observation deck, reminding us that this was just the beginning. And if 10% could make the earth shake, what horrors were waiting at 50 or worse at 100? We reset. The air was thick with smoke, the ground scorched with blackened scars from the first detonation. Our engineers worked fast, recalibrating the device for 20%. This time, a nervous silence hung over the crew. No chatter, no side conversations. Just the sound of machines whirring, cameras recording, and one voice over the intercom counting down from 10. The moment the blast ignited, the night lit up brighter than daylight. A ball of fire surged into the sky, its edges crackling with raw energy. The shockwave hit us seconds later, even stronger, slamming against our reinforced walls with enough force to make the room groan. People gasped. Some stumbled back, and it was only 20%. By the time we reached 30%, fear had already replaced curiosity. The field outside looked like a battlefield. Craters layered over craters, soil shredded and twisted into unnatural formations. When the explosion tore through at this stage, it didn't just shake the earth, it fractured it. The ground rippled outward like water disturbed by a stone, only this was no ripple. This was a violent shudder of the earth itself, stretching far beyond the blast zone. Alarms blared in the observation room as sensors picked up seismic activity that shouldn't have been possible at such a low setting. Cameras cracked under the pressure, their lenses fogging with heat. And still, we pushed forward. 40%. No one spoke when the countdown started. It was too late to back out now, but the air reeked of dread. When the device erupted this time, it didn't just explode, it consumed. The firestorm swallowed everything in sight, turning steel plates into molten rivers, trees in the far distance igniting as if they were soaked in fuel. The shockwave sent tremors racing for miles, knocking over equipment that had been bolted to the ground. The earth outside looked like it had been clawed open, raw and unrecognizable. And still, we were only at 40%. Halfway, 50%. By now, every single person in the control room knew we were testing something that was no longer under our control. But the dial kept turning, and the decision had already been made. At the half-strength detonation, the fireball rose higher than a skyscraper, its heat melting drones in midair before they could transmit their final images. The sound was indescribable, not a boom, not a crack, something beyond human comprehension, something that shook the body from the inside out. The shockwave flattened everything within reach. Buildings designed to withstand natural disasters crumbled like sandcastles. The ground split open with fractures so deep they seemed bottomless. The engineers exchanged looks of terror, as if silently asking the same question. If this is only 50, what nightmare waits at 100? 60%. The blast didn't just destroy it, warped reality around it. The heat distorted the air so violently that the horizon bent like a mirage. Sound itself seemed delayed, carried unevenly, as if the atmosphere couldn't decide how to handle the chaos. The cameras we'd reinforced to survive nuclear-level detonations melted into twisted frames of useless metal. The control room shook, lights flickering overhead, and we began to wonder if even we were safe behind reinforced walls. But the test wasn't stopping. 70%. The countdown voice trembled this time, as if even the speaker knew they were calling out the end of reason. The explosion didn't just tear through matter, it erased it. Everything within the blast zone didn't shatter, didn't burn, didn't fall apart. It vanished, reduced to nothingness in a blinding white void that lasted only a second but felt eternal. When vision returned, the earth was carved hollow, a pit so deep that our sensors couldn't read its bottom. Silence followed for a moment, an unnatural silence, the kind that only comes when the world itself holds its breath. 80%. By now, the scientists begged for the test to end. The risks were no longer theoretical. We were standing on the edge of something we weren't meant to touch. But the dial turned anyway. The blast didn't look like fire this time. It looked like the sun itself had been dragged down to Earth. A sphere of plasma bloomed outward, swallowing the sky, eclipsing everything behind it. The pressure wave ripped the air apart, creating a thunder so violent it left ears ringing long after it was over. The observation deck cracked, bolts popped loose. And still, the test continued. 90%. Nobody breathed, nobody spoke. The tension was suffocating. When the device ignited, the force of the explosion felt infinite. The horizon itself disappeared in a curtain of blinding light, expanding faster than the eye could follow. The ground buckled as if entire tectonic plates had been shoved aside. The aftershock shattered glass across cities miles away, alarms screaming in places that shouldn't have even been touched. We weren't observing a weapon anymore. We were staring at the undoing of the natural world. Then came the final stage, 100%. The silence before the last countdown was unbearable, every second dripping with the weight of irreversible consequence. When the final detonation occurred, there were no words left. The blast wasn't a sound, wasn't a sight, it was everything. The earth convulsed violently, swallowing entire landscapes in an instant. The fireball grew beyond imagination, climbing higher than clouds, spreading wider than the horizon itself. The pressure wave hit with such fury that structures vanished like smoke in the wind, ripped from existence as if they had never been there. Cameras blacked out instantly, instruments fried, and every sensor screamed with unreadable numbers before shutting down forever. The world outside had been erased. No terrain, no remnants, no shadows of what once stood, only a void, a wasteland carved by energy too vast for survival. The truth was undeniable. At 100%, survival was not only unlikely, it was impossible. This was no longer just a test. This was a glimpse into destruction so complete that nothing could endure it. And the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was the chilling realization that we had reached the absolute limit of devastation. And as the smoke cleared, one thought echoed louder than the blast itself. This was the kind of power no one should ever unleash again.